My name is Ethan Clark, and for a long time I thought my life was a monument to hard work and stability. I'm 36 and I own my own repair business. From the moment my alarm screams at 5 a.m. until I lock up my truck at night, my world is about honest labor. The bite of a wrench on a rusted pipe, the satisfying hum of a newly installed HVAC unit, the clean snap of a wire connection. I built this from nothing. My father was a factory worker who lost his job when the plant closed. My mother was a waitress who never stopped worrying about bills. I swore I'd never live like that. I wanted to build something so solid, so unshakable, that it could withstand any storm. 4 years ago, I met Madison. She was at a friend's barbecue, laughing in a sundress, and she seemed to see the man behind the grease-stained hands. She appreciated my ambition, my long hours, my plans for the future. She was beautiful, all bright smiles and sharp wit. We dated for a year and got married. A few months after the wedding, she quit her job as a receptionist. "I want to focus on making our house a home," she told me. I didn't question it. We made enough on my income alone, and the idea of coming home to a wife who could focus on the little things, it felt like the reward for all my years of grinding. On the surface, our marriage was a perfectly manicured lawn. We talked about kids, about our future, about vacations we'd never take. But the routines were what really held us together, a quiet choreography of a life lived side by side. I'd work a 10 or 12-hour day, and when I got home, she'd have something ready for dinner, either cooked or ordered in. Our conversations were short about the day's trivialities. The physical intimacy had slowed to a near halt, but I told myself it was normal. Life just gets in the way. She seemed content, and that was all that mattered to me. I was content too. Our home was the physical embodiment of my success. It was a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where people actually know their neighbors. Every inch of that house was a part of me. I had rewired the entire electrical system, ripped out and rebuilt the kitchen cabinets, and refinished the hardwood floors myself. It was my kingdom, my proof that I had defied my past. But in the last 6 months, a small, insidious crack had appeared in the foundation. Madison became attached to her phone, always keeping the screen angled away from me. When she answered texts, her smile wasn't for me. It was for the screen. She started dressing up more, not for our infrequent date nights, but for her errands and yoga classes. When I asked what she did all day, her answers became vague and distracted, like she was telling me what she thought I wanted to hear. I pushed it down, blamed it on my own exhaustion. I trusted her. To not trust her would mean admitting the life I built was a lie, and that was a truth I wasn't ready to face. I should have listened to my instincts. Because the next afternoon, my entire world would collapse in a hotel parking lot. I received a work call for an emergency repair at a newly opened boutique hotel downtown, a job that would shatter the illusion I'd been living in. The Grand Meridian Hotel was everything I wasn't. It was all polished chrome and silent opulence, the kind of place where the air itself felt too clean. I drove my beat-up work truck into the service area, my toolbox rattling in the passenger seat, a stark contrast to the luxury cars parked neatly in the lot. The call was for a faulty AC unit in a penthouse suite. A quick job, I figured. I'd be in and out in an hour. Then I saw her. The sight hit me with the force of a physical blow. She stepped out of a sleek silver BMW, a car I'd never seen before, her laugh echoing in the sterile air of the parking garage. It wasn't the sound of my wife's usual giggle. This was a free, unburdened laugh I hadn't heard in years. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize, fitted a deep emerald green that shimmered in the afternoon light. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless. She wasn't dressed for an errand. She was dressed for a date. Beside her, a man stood tall and confident in a tailored suit. His hand was on the small of her back, his fingers resting there with a familiarity that made my stomach clench. They walked toward the hotel's main entrance, their bodies close, her hand intertwined with his. My mind, in a desperate attempt to protect me, tried to rationalize it. A work colleague, a friend, maybe her cousin, the one from Chicago I'd never met? But the way she looked at him, the easy intimacy in their movements, it wasn't a friendship. It was a secret world I wasn't a part of, the world of a cheating woman and her lover. I stood there frozen, my toolbox suddenly feeling impossibly heavy, a dead weight in my hand. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to storm inside, to scream her name, to shatter this perfect little scene. I wanted to drag her out by the arm and expose her for what she was right there in front of him. But my legs wouldn't move. A part of me, the rational part buried under a wave of hot, visceral rage, stopped me. I turned around and got back in my truck. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. The repair job was forgotten. I called the front desk, my voice a hollow monotone, and lied about a family emergency. As I sat in that parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the pain of betrayal was quickly overshadowed by something far colder. I thought about the house I'd built, the money I'd saved, the life I'd poured my sweat and blood into. I thought about all the lies, the vague answers, the secretive phone. It all clicked into place, a horrifying mosaic of deception. And then the clarity came. If I confronted her, she would lie. She would gaslight me, tell me I was crazy, that I was imagining things. She would turn this into my fault. And in the end, she would take half of everything I had built. The thought of her walking away with my hard-earned money, my home, my peace of mind, that was a pain even deeper than the betrayal itself. So I made a choice. I wouldn't say a word, not yet. I would go home and I would act normal. I would play the loving, clueless husband. And while she was living her double life, I would be quietly, meticulously gathering every piece of evidence. I would build a case so airtight, so damning, that she wouldn't have a leg to stand on. When the time came, I wouldn't just leave her. I would destroy her so completely, she would never recover. I drove home, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind already a battlefield of strategy. 2 hours later, when she walked through the door, her makeup slightly smudged, a fake smile on her face, she claimed she'd been at a friend's house for lunch. I met her at the kitchen, smiled back, and said, "Dinner smells good, honey." I leaned in and kissed her cheek, a ghost of a kiss that was a promise of war. She had no idea that the man she betrayed was about to become her worst nightmare. The morning after my world ended in that parking lot, I was a ghost in my own life. I made coffee, my movements a practiced ritual of a man I used to be. I kissed Madison goodbye. Her lips were soft, oblivious. She gave me a small, half-awake smile as I walked out the door, the same smile she'd given me for 4 years. The man walking out the door was a perfect imitation of Ethan Clarke. The man inside was gone, replaced by something colder, more focused. During my lunch break, I drove to a part of town I never went to, a grimy little street lined with pawn shops and liquor stores. I climbed a creaking staircase to a small office above a storefront, the air thick with the smell of old paper and dust. I was meeting Ryan Carter, a private investigator my friend had recommended. Ryan's office was sparse, his face a roadmap of hard-won experience. He was an ex-cop, and his eyes had that tired, knowing look of someone who had seen it all. I laid it out for him, every gut-wrenching detail, my voice flat and emotionless. He listened, his pen scratching on a notepad. When I finished, I asked him the only question that mattered. "How much proof do I need?" Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Enough that her lawyer won't have a leg to stand on," he replied, his voice as dry as the air in the room. "Photos, videos, receipts, timestamps. We document everything. I'll get a GPS tracker on her car. It's in your name, so we're in the clear. I'll run surveillance schedules. Depending on how often she's meeting this guy, I can have you a bulletproof case in 2 to 4 weeks. The retainer was steep, $3,500 up front." I didn't hesitate. I pulled out a wad of cash from my wallet, the money I had set aside for a new furnace. It felt like a small price for the truth. Ryan got to work immediately. 3 days later, he called. He had her pattern. She met her lover, a real estate developer named Jackson Taylor, twice a week at the Grand Meridian. Sometimes they'd have lunch at upscale restaurants I couldn't afford on my best day. Back at home, the performance began. The silent war. I played the part of the devoted husband perfectly. I asked her about her day. I complimented her new outfits. She talked about her yoga class, about grabbing coffee with friends. Every lie she told, every fake smile, every "I love you" was a fresh nail in the coffin of our marriage. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the loneliness. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't lean on a friend or rage at a brother. I had to be strong, functional, and trusting. At night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, feeling like a ghost in my own house, a stranger in my own skin. 3 weeks later, Ryan delivered. The evidence was in a folder, a thick packet of cold, hard truth. Photos of Madison and Jackson walking into hotel rooms, their hands intertwined. Timestamps showing she was there for hours at a time. A blurry video of them kissing in his car, their heads close, their bodies a single, intimate shape. And a stack of receipts from his credit card. The hotels, the dinners, even a purchase for a diamond necklace I had seen her wearing just last week. The evidence wasn't just a confirmation of her betrayal. It was a map of my stupidity. I felt a strange mix of vindication and profound sadness, the relief of knowing the truth mixed with the heartbreak of a life built on a lie. With the evidence in hand, I made another appointment. My next stop was a law office, a polished high-rise building that smelled of success. Claire Watson, my new divorce attorney, was a force of nature. She was in her 50s, sharply dressed, and had the kind of eyes that missed nothing. I laid out the case, the photos, the videos, the fact that Madison hadn't worked a day in 4 years. Claire listened, her expression unreadable. "This is textbook," she stated, her voice sharp and to the point. "Adultery, financial dependency, documented proof. In this state, we can leverage this for a favorable settlement. She won't get alimony. You'll keep the house, your business, your savings. We'll file no fault to keep it clean, but we'll use this evidence to pressure her into signing quickly." I looked at her, my voice a hollow whisper. "When?" A slight smile touched her lips. "Whenever you're ready. We'll draft the papers. You tell me when to have her served. I'd recommend doing it when you're present. Gives you control of the situation. We set a date 2 weeks out. Enough time to finalize the paperwork, to make sure there were no loose ends. Enough time for me to get my affairs in order." That night, I came home to the smell of my favorite meal, lasagna. Madison was in the kitchen, humming to the radio, completely oblivious. I knew this was the last time I would pretend. Soon, her perfect lie would shatter, and I would be there to watch every single second of it. In 48 hours, Madison's perfect lie would shatter, and I'd be there to watch every second of it. It was a Tuesday evening, a deliberate choice. I knew Madison wouldn't have met Jackson on a Tuesday. She liked to keep her trysts confined to my busiest work days, typically Wednesdays and Fridays. She would be home, complacent, settled in, completely unsuspecting. At exactly 6:30 p.m., I walked through the door. I was calm, unnaturally so, like a lake of ice over fire. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head, editing my lines, refining my composure. Madison was on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up right away. "Hey, babe, how was work?" she mumbled, her voice lazy and familiar. "Long," I replied, setting my keys on the counter with a quiet clink. But productive. I didn't sit next to her. Instead, I moved to the armchair across the room, creating distance, making my presence an intrusion. She glanced at me then, catching the lack of warmth, but dismissed it, returning to her screen. I picked up the remote and flipped the channel, landing on a nature documentary. On screen, a lioness was stalking a lone zebra, her movements slow, methodical, inevitable. The irony made me smile inwardly. I waited. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the doorbell rang. Madison frowned, pulling her attention fully from her phone. "Are we expecting someone?" I kept my gaze fixed on the television, watching the predator close the gap. "Not we," I said quietly, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "You." She stood up, annoyed by the interruption, and walked to the door. When she opened it, a young man in a cheap suit stood there, holding a thick manila envelope. "Madison Hall?" he asked, his tone flat and professional. "Yes," she replied, her voice laced with confusion. "You've been served." He handed her the envelope, gave a perfunctory nod, and retreated quickly, melting into the twilight. Madison stared down at the envelope, her face draining of color. Her composure began to crack immediately. Her hands trembled slightly as she clumsily tore open the clasp. I watched her from the armchair, completely still. The silence of the room punctuated only by the nature documentary's narrator describing the final, lethal strike of the lioness. She pulled out the documents. Her eyes scanned the first page. Divorce in bold letters. Then, irreconcilable differences. Then her gaze fell to the back, where Claire, my attorney, had cleverly paper-clipped a few choice evidence photos. The color rushed from her face, leaving her pale and hollow. Then the blood rushed back in a violent wave, turning her cheeks crimson. What? What is this? Her voice was a fragile whisper, the last gasp of her perfect denial. I finally leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. It's exactly what it looks like. I know about Jackson. I know about the Grand Meridian. I know about every lunch, every lie, every time you came home smelling like someone else's cologne, pretending you had been at yoga. Her mouth opened and closed, incapable of forming a coherent defense. She looked down at the photos. Her and Jackson, undeniable, crisp, clear as day, walking into the hotel, kissing passionately in the parking lot. Ethan, this isn't... Don't! I cut her off, my voice cold and steady, lacking any trace of the rage she expected. Don't insult me with more lies. You used up your last chance to tell the truth weeks ago. She let the envelope drop, the papers scattering on the hardwood floor, and dissolved instantly. She dropped to her knees, tears already streaming, the performance ramping up. Ethan, please, it was a mistake. I was lonely. You're always working. I didn't mean for it to happen. She began to plead. I stood up instantly, stepping back from her frantic reach. You didn't mean to screw another man in a hotel twice a week for 3 months? You didn't mean to use my money? The money I earned fixing furnaces and toilets on new dresses to impress him? You didn't mean to lie to my face every day? She was sobbing hysterically now, clutching her head. Please, we can fix this. I'll end it. I'll never see him again. We can go to counseling. Please, Ethan, I love you. You love me? I repeated, a dry, harsh laugh escaping my throat. You don't even know what that word means. Do you know what I did while you were out there pretending to be single? I worked, I saved. I built this life. I gestured around the house, my house. And you threw it away for a guy with nice suits and a nice car. I'm sorry, she choked out, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to the private folder Ryan had given me and held the screen toward her. A video played, a short, silent clip of her and Jackson laughing, her head resting on his shoulder. This is what sorry looks like to you? Because to me, it looks like someone who was certain she'd never get caught. Madison finally crumbled, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with helpless sobs. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said flatly, walking past her to the counter. I want you to sign the papers. My attorney will contact you with the details. You're not getting alimony. You're not getting the house. You're not getting anything except the chance to walk away quietly. Her face lifted, wet with tears, fear replacing guilt. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, I replied, grabbing my jacket. Maybe Jackson will take you in. Or maybe you'll figure it out the way I did, by working. I grabbed my keys. I'm staying at a friend's place tonight. I want you out of here by the end of the week. Take your clothes, your personal stuff, nothing else. If you take one dime or one possession that's mine, I'll file charges for theft. And I have receipts for everything in this house. Ethan, please. I turned back one last time, my eyes meeting hers, devoid of any connection, any regret. We're done, Madison. You made your choice. Now, you get to live with it. I walked out, the sound of the front door closing, cutting off her sobbing. I got into my truck and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see her standing in the brightly lit doorway, a small, broken silhouette against the kingdom she had forfeited. For the first time in weeks, the tension left my chest and I felt like I could truly breathe. She was out of my life. But the man who helped her betray me, Jackson Taylor, still walked around like he'd done nothing wrong. That was about to change. 2 weeks after Madison walked out the door, the divorce was largely settled. The house was mine. The business was safe. My lawyer, Claire, had used the evidence like a scalpel, leaving Madison with nothing but her few boxes of clothes and the humiliating shame of defeat. The paperwork was signed, the threat of exposure hanging over her head enough to keep her from fighting the settlement. I should have felt peace, but the quiet emptiness of the house was not enough. A cold, familiar burn remained in my chest. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about Jackson Taylor, the man who had entered my life like a wrecking ball, who had enjoyed the benefits of my labor and my trust, and who was now back in his polished office, driving his silver BMW, closing deals and living his upscale life as if nothing had happened. He hadn't lost a dime. He hadn't felt an ounce of fear or regret. That was an imbalance I couldn't tolerate. I didn't want his money. I didn't want him arrested. I just wanted him to know, physically and irrevocably, that some actions draw consequences that lawyers and paper can't touch. I'm not a violent man. I built my life with wrenches, not fists. But I also knew a few guys from the old days, when I was swinging a hammer on construction sites. Guys who operated outside the clean, legal world I had built. I called Owen, a former Marine who now bounced at a downtown club, and Dylan, a quiet mechanic with a long memory for grudges and a solid code of loyalty. I met them at a dive bar off the highway. I didn't play the victim. I just laid out the facts over cheap beer. This guy slept with my wife for months, helped her lie to me. He thinks there are no consequences. I want him to understand that there are. Owen and Dylan exchanged a knowing look. Owen spoke first, his voice gravelly. We're not killing anyone, Ethan. I don't want him dead, I confirmed. I just want him to remember this week for the rest of his life. They did their homework. Jackson had a pretentious fitness routine, a late-night power walk around his affluent neighborhood twice a week, usually around 10 p.m., probably to balance out the scotch he drank. 3 nights later, we were waiting. We were parked 3 blocks away, watching the GPS signal on Dylan's phone, which tracked the route. Jackson appeared on schedule, his posture arrogant even from a distance, AirPods plugged into his ears, cocooned in his own bubble of self-importance. He took a shortcut through a narrow, dimly lit alley between a dry cleaner and a defunct bodega, a stupid move for a man in his tax bracket. When he was halfway through, Owen, Dylan, and I stepped out of the shadows. Blocking his path, Jackson stopped, pulling out one AirPod, irritation flashing in his eyes. Can I help you guys? I stepped forward, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. Jackson Taylor? His expression shifted. Confusion, then a flicker of sickening recognition. Do I know you? Not yet, I said. But you know my wife. Madison Hall. The color drained from his face instantly. The arrogance vanished, replaced by primal fear. He took a nervous step back, his eyes darting toward the alley entrance. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Neither did I replied, my voice dangerously soft. But you gave it to me anyway. What happened next was fast, brutal, and utterly silent, save for the grunt of effort and the dull thud of bone against flesh. Owen moved first, a hard, concussive punch that landed right in Jackson's gut, stealing his breath and folding him over. Dylan followed, a vicious kick to the ribs that dropped Jackson to his knees. He tried to curl up, covering his head, but he was facing 3 men who knew how to use their weight. We didn't use weapons, no bats, no knives. Just fists, boots, and the kind of calculated violence that leaves marks but stops short of permanent damage. They focused on his ribs, his arms, his legs. They broke nothing, but they ensured everything would be excruciatingly painful for the next month. I stood back, my arms crossed, watching my 2 associates administer the justice the legal system couldn't. I watched Jackson gasp and groan on the dirty pavement, bleeding from his split lip, his eyes wide with stark terror. When Owen and Dylan stepped back, I crouched down beside Jackson, who was clutching his ribs, tasting his own blood. You thought you could just walk into another man's life and take what wasn't yours, I whispered, ensuring the message was the last thing he heard. You thought there'd be no consequences, only fun little trips to the Grand Meridian. Now you know better. Jackson tried to speak, but only a wheeze escaped. Stay away from Madison, I continued. Stay away from married women. And if you even think about calling the cops, remember, I've got photos of you screwing my wife and videos too. I'll make sure everyone you work with, everyone in your precious social circle, everyone in your family sees them. I'll ruin your career and your reputation faster than you can close a deal. Understand? He nodded weakly, eyes swimming with tears. I stood up, signaled to Owen and Dylan, and we walked out of the alley. I didn't look back. I knew I had crossed a line, a definite moral boundary. But as I drove home, a dark, heavy satisfaction settled over me. Justice, I thought, sometimes needs a push. The storm was over. Now I had to figure out what kind of man I'd become. 6 months? 6 months had passed since I had stood in that alley, watching Jackson Taylor learn the price of his entitlement. 6 months since I walked away from the broken man and the broken promises and the quiet satisfaction of a debt repaid. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. The paperwork, clean and definitive, confirmed that the house, the business, and every dollar I had earned was unequivocally mine. Claire had done her job perfectly. The threat of exposing Madison's affair to the court and to her family was more than enough leverage. She signed without a whimper, taking the clothes she came in with and the bitter taste of defeat. My business, ironically, was thriving. It felt like the universe was rewarding my honesty, finally balancing the scales. The cold, meticulous focus I had poured into planning Madison's downfall, I now redirected into my work. I was more reliable, more focused, and contractors noticed, sending me regular high-paying jobs. The storm had passed, and my foundation, the one Madison tried to tear down, was stronger than ever. Madison's life, meanwhile, had unraveled with predictable speed. I heard things through mutual acquaintances, the kind of gossip that filters back when someone falls hard. The affair with Jackson ended the moment he crawled out of that alley, beaten and terrified. He hadn't wanted a mistress. He just wanted easy, consequence-free sex. When consequences showed up in the form of 3 angry men, he vanished. Madison had relocated to the other side of town, settling in a cramped, noisy one-bedroom apartment with thin walls and the perpetually empty feeling of failure. She was working as a server at a cheap chain restaurant. I imagined her on her feet for 10 hours, dealing with mediocre tips and rude customers, a stark contrast to the leisurely yoga and expensive lunches she once enjoyed on my dime. She tried reaching out a few times, texts asking to talk, emails begging for closure. I ignored every single one. There was nothing left to say. Her closure was the life she was living now. I ran into Jackson once, an unavoidable accident at a gas station on a Friday evening. He was wearing an expensive coat, but he carried his body differently now. He walked with a slight, almost imperceptible limp, a ghost of the pain Owen had inflicted. He was paying for premium gas when he saw me standing by the pump. Our eyes met for maybe half a second, and the color instantly drained from his face. His mouth went dry, and his eyes widened with naked, paralyzing fear. He shoved his card back in his wallet, abandoned the pump, and drove off quickly. He lived with it, just like I told him he would. He remembered. As for me, the man who emerged from that silent war wasn't the same soft man who believed in a perfect life. I am more guarded now, more cautious with my trust. Maybe I'm cynical, but I prefer to call it wisdom earned in the gutter. I started seeing someone new a couple of months ago. Olivia. She works the register at the local grocery store near my shop. She's kind, grounded, and she works her own long hours. She appreciates honesty and a comfortable, predictable life. We take it slow. She knows the basics, that my ex-wife cheated and that it ended badly, but I keep the darker details of the reckoning locked away. That part of my life, the part involving the alley and the cold, focused rage belongs only to me. Some nights, when I'm alone in this house, my house, built by my hands, I sit in silence and think about everything. I don't regret my choices. Not the surveillance, not the divorce, not even the night in that alley. I protected what was mine, and I made sure the people who tried to take it away paid a personal price. Maybe to some, that makes me a villain, but I sleep fine. Because in the end, justice was served. Not by a system that rewards deception, but by a man who finally stood up for himself. And now, finally, I am free. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.